Hey guys, my name's Crystal Kenny, and I'm in love with creating. All things artistic and imagination involved. I'm an American girl who chased her creative dreams all the way to Paris, France, making a living using photography. This podcast takes you inside the stories of all the artsy folks I've met along the way and gives you that extra push to discover your creative gifts. The desire to create is deeply inside each and every one of us, and I give you the tools and inspiration to find a new way of living a more creative life. This is La Vie Creative, the podcast. Show, I interview local poet Jason Stoneking. He's been in Paris for quite some time now, and we talk about what it's like to be a real-life poet living the dream in Paris, France. So welcome to the show, Jason. So great to finally have you here.
Hi, Crystal. Thanks for having me.
I just want to get started a little bit about your story. I know you've been in Paris for quite some time now, and I mean, so many people have come here for different reasons, but what brought you here?
You know, I think I first came just for maybe the most cliche reason, which is that I was a poet in Paris I was a poet in the States, and all the poets eventually go to Paris. We have this tradition of American writers coming over here, whether it's, Hemingway or Jim Morrison or almost whoever you want to think of, the Beats, eventually they all came here. And so at some point I was running around the States writing poetry and hearing all these romantic legends of poets who went to France or poets who came from France. And I felt like I just had to do it too.
I mean, that's so true, because so many writers like dream of coming here and like sitting in a cafe and just like gathering ideas and being inspired by others. And when you arrived here, did you do that? Did you feel like it was some kind of fantasy, or do you feel like that is legitimate, like what these writers and poets dream of about living here?
Well, when I first came, I sort of ran around and did all the poet touristy stuff, like I went to all the famous writers' graves, and I went to, Shakespeare and Company and the Café de Flore and all that kind of stuff. And then, after a couple of weeks, that kind of dried up. And then all of a sudden you're in sort of the real life of it. And over the ensuing few years, I sort of came to discover that there is still quite a large population of expat writers and poets who are living in Paris and renting these tiny little rooms and staying up all night drinking wine and, playing music on the sides of the river and talking about poems and art until the sun comes up. And so for me, it kind of did turn out to still be a true thing, once the fantasy part of it sort of faded away.
Yeah, because a lot of people, we have these shiny ideas about Paris and what it's going to be. But I think you're very correct. Like, a lot of writers are still like collaborating and drinking together and hanging out in cafes. And, most people live in these little studios to, do what they want to do to be here. So you would say it's true. And do you find that you are inspired by these other artists or inspired by the energy of Paris?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think community is really important, just in terms of having people to give you feedback about your work and rally around you when you're fighting hard to make something, and also just to see what other people are doing sort of sometimes gives you the courage to get up early and buckle down as well. I think Paris is special because of exactly what you pointed out, that there are all these sort of cheap little rooms that people can afford to stay in while they're also doing what they want to be doing. And that's a sort of a unique thing about Paris that they don't really have in, New York or London or LA or Tokyo or, lots of other places.
It's still affordable by like major city standards. I think people are always a little shocked at rent here being cheap in quotation marks compared to New York or London. It's a little more affordable if you want to come live here as an artist in these little like studios or whatever.
Absolutely.
And talk a little bit about what inspired you to become a poet. I mean, where does this all stem from?
Well, I think, maybe this is a little bit of an easy answer, but I never really wanted to do anything other than be a writer. And I think it's partially because my mom was a volunteer librarian when I was a little kid, and the house was always full of books. And I was always sort of getting the message that, writers held the keys to whatever worlds they wanted to invent or escape to or create for others. And I always just thought that that was a magical thing to be. And I remember being very excited about the first time I held a pen or writing my first words when I was a kid. And I always thought there was a magic in that.
It's so nice when you have supportive or even like creative parents and like obviously coming from a librarian family. I mean, were they supportive of your writing career? Did they encourage you to become a writer?
Yeah, absolutely. I was really lucky with my parents. They both always encouraged me to do whatever I wanted to do. I think um, I left school early and decided to pursue things on my own path, which I think was a little bit difficult for my mom to accept. But my dad's philosophy was always that if you work hard enough, you can do anything you want, and that the measure of your accomplishment is not what you want to do or who you want to be, but just how hard you work at it.
I think that's very much like our parents' mentality too. It's like that pull your bootstraps up and you can do anything kind of mentality, which I hope that people still feel today. But obviously, you did it. You're a Parisian now, a poet, a Parisian poet.
It's true. I mean, I guess not everybody has the same, the same parents or the same messages coming to them when they're young, and so not everybody has the same benefits in that regard. So maybe not everyone has the same bootstraps, but I think it is important to empower ourselves by just thinking that the amount of our own character that we apply to what we're trying to do is a more important metric than the amount of external validation that we receive.
I like that. And I think that's super difficult, especially for artists, because we're always looking for validation.
Yeah,
So it's nice to hear like an actual artist say, yeah, just, believe in yourself. Just do it.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
You can do it. Stop caring about what other people think. And talk a little bit about your poetry. Like, what inspires it? What do you write about? What are you working on right now?
So I tend to write about my immediate reality, what I'm going through in my life, the people around me. I write diaries. I write things in epistolary formats, like long handwritten letters to people. My current project is a series of portraits where people sit down for me like they would for a painter, and I write a portrait about them in words. So I'm really interested in handwritten documents of immediate experience and surroundings.
Now, when you're sitting there in these like portrait sitting sessions, um, do you ever find yourself like drawing a blank? Like, okay, I mean, you're looking at the person, you're describing them. Do you know anything about them? Like, how exactly does it work? How long are these poems?
So the portraits are a single face of A4 paper. So they come out to a few hundred words, like maybe around 400 words roughly. And I've done them for people I know and people I don't know at all. Each session is completely different, but I've found that if you give it time, which I do, I don't breeze through them. Someone sits for me for a couple of hours usually. So I might look at them for 15, 20 minutes without writing while I'm trying to figure out what is the observation I want to capture. But if I give it enough time, I've found that there's no person that you can really, if you really stare at them that long, that doesn't inspire you to say something. I think we've all kind of lost the art of looking at each other a little bit. And when you really do take the time to look at another person, without speaking, without saying your own thing, without distraction, and just allow yourself to be moved by how they move and how they act and how they sit, how they walk, how they look. It's amazing how deep an empathy we can access and how quickly, and there's always something to say.
And do you make up stories about them based on what you see in them, or is it more just about how they look?
No, I don't. Well, neither actually. I don't write any fiction at all. I don't invent stories unless we get into the sort of idea that everything we perceive is in some way a narrative or a fiction. But I don't make anything up. And I don't generally talk about physical appearance very much either. What I try to do is sit with the person and sort of just feel, for lack of a better term, the vibe that exists between me and them in the room that they're giving off. I might talk about the way they move, or if somebody is nervously folding their hands, or if somebody's pacing around, or if somebody, is sitting tranquilly, what they do in the space, what they do with their body, how they communicate without words.
I like that. And what you said about like bringing back the silence and just being in the moment and like feeling the vibe. I mean, how often do we actually ever do that unless we're sitting in like the DMV or something? Waiting, like you take like a more creative approach to it this way. I love that.
Exactly. I mean, maybe I should write a couple portraits in the DMV. That would probably be a perfect.
Or you could do it at the prefecture where we all wait for our visas. What's the in there? A nightmare.
Exactly. Exactly.
And talk a little bit about Found Stages. This is another performance you do.
Okay, yeah. So Found Stages is a series on my Instagram that began during the pandemic. I was stuck over in the States for a couple of years during the pandemic because I didn't have the papers to travel. And so I was stuck back in my old hometown, which was always kind of a difficult place for me, a small town where I don't really have a lot of connections. And I was over there with Leslie McAllister, another artist who lives here in Paris. And it was actually her idea. I was saying, I can't perform. I can't read for anybody. What can I do? We can't go out. We can't have events. And she said, why don't you just, when you see a place, we would go for walks and I would see places often that looked like a stage, like a lit up loading dock or like a sort of a stone pedestal in a park, and she would say, why don't you, when you see those places, why don't you just run up and just improvise a poem and we can film it.
That's so fun. I love that.
Yeah, I said, wow, that sounds like a lot of fun, actually. So we started filming them, and then they started kind of getting some attention on my Instagram, and it sort of became a series. And I think it was also Leslie that came up with the name Found Stages for it, which I just felt immediately right when I heard it. And I just the other day decided I'm going to relaunch that series here in Paris now that I'm back. So I'm going to be doing some new ones soon.
I think it would be great to be doing that in Paris. I mean, there's so many Found Stages in Paris. There's so many. I think the street performers find them all the time. I have the statue guy in my backyard always standing there being a statue and asking for money. Although I don't know if I respect it as much as like live poetry. I feel like he's got an easier job.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't, for me in this world, like every kind of making art or doing performance takes like an enormous amount of courage and vulnerability. And I'm kind of cheering for all those people because any choice in that world is so much harder to make than just kind of going into an office building and getting a job and playing it safe. So I don't really, I have some amount of respect for anyone who's pursuing a creative or performative life.
No discrimination here, guys. If you're going away from the soulless jobs, we respect you. And talk a little bit about your group, Paris Heretics. And you always are supporting other artists. You're helping to publish their books. You're doing so many great things. Talk a little bit about that.
Thanks. Yeah. So Paris Heretics is a label that I founded a couple of years ago here in Paris. And the idea was I just know so many talented artists here in town doing really great high quality work who, because either they're not French or they don't have papers or they're not really plugged into the local system here, don't necessarily have access to the kind of production values and distribution opportunities that local artists and writers do. And they're often struggling to sort of find a forum or find a platform for their work. And I thought, gosh, it would be really great to just amplify some of these people whose voices are so worthy. And so I started producing projects, humbly at first, just without any outside funding, just trying to make some videos for some poets and musicians. And I've published a couple of books now for a couple of local poets that I really admire. And I am trying to sort of grow that into a platform.
So I asked, what do you feel about social media? Like so many artists nowadays feel they have to use it and they're not super excited about it. They feel like they just want to produce their work and that's it. So how do you feel about social media? Do you think we need it? Do you think artists should be using it?
Gosh, this is one of those ones where all my friends are going to laugh at me when they hear me saying this because I know a lot of them feel differently than me. But I love social media. And the reason I love it is because just in the most sort of old school political way, it puts us in control of the means of production in terms of, making and distributing. Um, I hate the word content, but media stuff. I love the fact that a friend of mine can completely independently produce and then post, a video or some text or some photography or some other kind of art project. And then their friends can share it, like it, amplify it, and sort of generate attention around it. It gives us the ability to support local independent projects instead of having to choose from what's broadcasted by the big companies. Like when I was a kid, there were 3 TV channels and you could either watch NBC or watch ABC or watch CBS. You couldn't watch your friend Carrie reading poetry and then share that with everybody and say that that's the channel you're on,
Yeah.
and I think that empowerment is, it's great, even though some people feel self-conscious about that, self-promotion or promoting their friends. I think that it's a wonderful tool, and I enjoy using it.
So basically, the internet could be one big found stage.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, it's an opportunity for us to sort of shine the spotlight where we want to, and not necessarily at the big celebrities and the big companies and stuff.
Yeah, and exactly. A lot of people have become celebrities that you would never have known about because of a YouTube channel or whatever. They're making millions now. It's wild.
Yeah, absolutely. And because they did something that was meaningful to their community, however big or small that community was at the start, they were able to get that grassroots amplification. And I think that's a really interesting phenomenon.
Going back to poetry, in your opinion, what makes a good poet?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. Um, I think for me, the poets I admire the most are the ones who give me a sense that they are in a deep investigation of themselves, and they're not just trying to say what they already know, and they're not just trying to say what's going to get applause or sell books, but they're trying to really sort of claw into themselves for an observation that feels difficult to extract, and it involves some deep um, self-examination. And when I kind of get a sense of that, when I'm hearing a poem, it really excites me and it gives me a lot of respect for the writer.
And I think our listeners are probably curious. I mean, what is the difference between just like general writing and poetry? Like, does it have to rhyme, or give us some examples of, what is the difference?
I'm glad you asked that. I have a lot of friends who really like to talk about what is poetry and what isn't poetry. And I don't personally really find that a fruitful avenue to explore, because for me the best poetry is the poetry that challenges my preconceptions about what poetry is. Before Marcel Duchamp, nobody ever would have thought that a found object could be placed in a gallery and called art.
Mhm.
And suddenly there was this concept that whatever the artist wants to say is art is art. And I feel very much that way about poetry too. If somebody shows me something, whether it's a text or a performative gesture or even a visual piece, and says to me, for me, this is poetry, then I take them at their word. And I say, okay, well, in that case, that person's the poet. And I'm going to just try to understand what's poetic about this for them, rather than sort of prescribing and giving rules for what is and isn't poetry. I think it's whatever feels poetic in your heart.
I like that. Poetic in your heart. There's my definition right there. Whatever feels poetic in your heart.
Nice.
And what do you hope to do with your work? How do you want to change the world, help the world? Do you want to do something bigger with your work?
Do I want to change the world? I want to be sincere in my approach to my work and in my relationships to the people that I write with and for and about, and reach for genuine connections. And I think if everybody who's making art does that, that will change the world. I don't know if I particularly want the changing of the world to fall more on my shoulders or some other artist's shoulders, but I think if we're all trying hard to be sincere, that the cumulative effect will have a positive change.
I agree completely. And do you feel the same way about what is the purpose of art in today's society? Do you think somehow the art has become more for the elite, or is it still for the masses? Does it depend on the country?
I think everybody is interacting with art in different ways, at different in different parts of society, in different parts of the world. Everybody has some interaction with art or creative material. Um, for me, what's most important about art, or what it really does in the world, is it represents a value system that isn't entirely governed by money and commerce. It's we all know what $100 is worth, and we all know what a pound of grain is worth. But when somebody makes something from nothing, with the intent to inspire or entertain, suddenly they're generating a sort of indefinite amount of value out of thin air. And I think that that's a really important thing for people to remember, that it's an opportunity to show what's valuable to us other than just what's obviously measurable.
Oh, I like that. And do you think that once you start making money doing something creative, it takes a little bit away from the joy of it?
I don't know. I mean, I think you can make things joyfully and then also have success with the things you make. I turn on the radio, sometimes hear songs I love, and I realize that the musicians who made them have probably become millionaires since making them. Um, Gosh, I don't know. A friend of mine went to a Rolling Stones concert a couple of weeks ago, and those guys are still having fun making music, and
Mhm.
it's been decades. So no, I don't think. I think if we start making things just for the money, then we take away our own joy that way. But
Mhm.
but if we make things with joy already, and then the money comes later, I don't think that has to destroy anything.
Mhm. Yeah, it's just focusing on the art itself, not about the end result.
Yeah, yeah. I think as long as you do what you do with sincerity, and you don't change it for the money, then you're not really compromising anything important.
And what's the most difficult part of being a poet in Paris?
Well, it's probably related to that last question. I mean, I think there is like a sort of a pressure, maybe not just in Paris, but everywhere, to try to achieve money and to try to have money. And to you have to somehow be working on your stuff, and you have to be paying the rent, and you have to be going out to events, and you have to be doing your socials. And there's so much that you have to do that that sort of balance gets tricky to maintain, and it's hard to keep your overhead low enough that you can keep your time free enough to really put your heart into what you're doing creatively. I mean, there are ways to find solutions to that, but I think that's the biggest obstacle, probably.
What would be the most rewarding part?
The most rewarding part of being a poet in Paris,
Mhm.
I think, just being part of the community here, where there are so many other people who came here or stayed here kind of looking for a similar thing to what I'm looking for, just wanting to sing and dance and write poems and play music and be around, a city full of people who appreciate those pursuits with a bit of love.
Yeah, with the same joy.
Absolutely.
And how do you define creativity?
For me, everybody's creative. I think we all have those impulses to kind of create, unexpected juxtapositions. We all amuse ourselves with jokes. We all kind of, sing in the shower. Um, I like this quote a lot. Leslie and I were just talking about this the other day. This quote by Joseph Beuys, who said, "Everybody's an artist," and I love that thought. And for me, creativity is just a matter of letting that out.
And do you have advice for people who are searching for their creative gifts, who maybe feel like they're not good at anything creative or don't know where to get started?
Well, yeah, I'd say there's no reason to feel like you're not good at anything, because everyone who's good at something is just someone who worked at it for a long time and gave it an effort. So I guess my advice would just be, ignore haters. Anybody who's trying to say something negative about what we're trying to do, that reflects on them. It doesn't really reflect on you. And if you are going to take critique or advice from somebody, take it from somebody who's doing something you admire, and making work that you respect, and then you can take that advice to heart. But But whatever it is you're into and inspired by, if you're into it, there's going to be other people who are into it too. So get it out there and find your people.
Yeah, find your tribe. That comes up a lot on the show about finding people with similar interests, because it really kind of comes like an energy hub. You can all kind of bounce things off each other.
Yeah, totally. Exactly. That's the great thing about starting a label too. You just pull together people who are working in a similar space and just let them sort of fuel and amplify each other's efforts.
Did the pandemic affect your work at all?
Well, absolutely. Yeah. So the Found Stages project emerged from that. And then also a lot of my other projects were put on hold. It was hard to get in a room with somebody to write a portrait. I did one on Zoom, but it's not quite the same. And then a lot of the Paris Heretics projects were put on hold because we couldn't have launch events, and it was hard to get productions together for books and records and stuff. So yeah, it definitely took a toll for a couple of years.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are still recovering from that, because especially for artists, and small artists, it was really hard to not connect and not go out to venues, to not be around other artists. So I think we're all semi-recovering from that.
Yeah, totally. But I do feel like people are starting to come back and feel a little bit more optimistic and energetic. And the rentrée this year, this fall in Paris, has been really a lot of great things going on.
Mm-hmm. A lot of energy. And why do you think Paris attracts artists in particular?
It's a great question. I don't know. I mean, it's I guess it's just, I think there's a legend, like a self-perpetuating legend. Artists come here because artists came here before, and then the ones that come here next become the ones that are here now, and then the next wave comes because of them. In the middle of that, I guess Paris also feeds back into it, because Paris really values its artists and its art world and its art community, and there's a lot of creative events going on here, and a lot of people that really care about arts and poetics and literature and dance and music.
Yeah, we support each other, and the French people support us as well, which we appreciate.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely.
Do you have any future projects you want to tell us about?
Well, right now, I've really just in the past year launched this portrait sittings series, and my big plan for the next few months is to put a lot more time into that. I'm thinking about doing some of them as public performances, where people sit for me in a public space and other people can watch the portrait being written. And I've just started to occasionally read a few of them in public too, with the consent of the people who posed for them. And I wrote a portrait not long ago of a great musician here in Paris named Lucas Lecacher, who was kind enough to pose for me. And we were talking about making a video from that session, which we photographed, and possibly putting it online somehow. So yeah, I'm just looking forward to getting more of those out there and doing more sittings with people.
I love that. And where can listeners connect with you online?
They can find me, pretty much if you search Jason Stoneking on any social, or maybe not any social, but most of the big ones, I'll be there. I've got a Facebook page. I've got Jay Stoneking on Twitter and Jason Stoneking the Poet on Instagram. I got a YouTube channel, and then also Paris Heretics. You can search on any platform, just at Paris Heretics, and you'll find the stuff that we're doing on the label and the other artists that I'm collaborating with.
Well, thank you so much, Jason. It was so great to hear more about your work, and I can't wait for people to listen to you and see you online.
Great. Well, thank you, Crystal. It was a pleasure talking to you and to your listeners, and I hope to see you around Paris again soon.
Thanks so much for tuning in to La Vie Creative. You can find more information on MissParisPhoto.com. And if you enjoyed this show, please feel free to share and spread the word for all my creative guests. We have the power to help them to keep doing what they love. See you next time.